This is another incident in a series of incidents where China has attempted to use force to intimidate and coerce the Philippines. Essentially, what we saw was a Chinese Coast Guard vessel interfere with, harass, and block the movement of a Philippine vessel on the high seas in international waters. And essentially, this is highly provocative and illegal by the Chinese. And what the Chinese were trying to do was to prevent the Philippines from resupplying their forces on one of the islands that the Philippines control, and that is Filipino territory. And this is just a series of events that the Chinese have been doing in the South China Sea over recent years.
Do you think it's one of the most assertive, that sort of firing of water cannon at the vessel?
Certainly. I mean, that was a very hostile act. People could have been injured quite easily. And then after firing that water cannon, the Chinese Coast Guard vessel blocked the progress of the Philippine vessel in a very dangerous maneuver that if the Philippine crew had not taken evasive action, essentially, that could have resulted in a collision at sea. So it was a really reckless and dangerous act by the Chinese Coast Guard vessel and the Chinese government.
Yeah, the Philippines government has summoned the China ambassador. Is that unusual? What might come of that conversation?
Look, I think what you're seeing is the Chinese government try to intimidate President Marcos into backing down on the issue of the South China Sea, on the Philippine claims. The Chinese are trying to claim the entirety of the South China Sea as their territorial waters, but that is not recognized under international law. The 2016 Arbitral Tribunal made it very clear that China has no historical or legal claim to the territories in the South China Sea. And so I think that what the Philippines will do is stand firm, and they'll seek to strengthen ties and relations with the United States. We should also stand firm behind the Philippines and make it clear to Beijing that this sort of behaviour is unacceptable.
Yeah, and even China's rhetoric was interesting, describing the Philippine Coast Guard as trespassers. So their rhetoric is getting stronger, their behaviour is getting stronger. It looks like they are continuing to, not just in this instance, but assert their authority, to your point, in the totality over the South China Sea.
Oh, exactly. They're a rising power. One of the Chinese foreign ministers, I believe it was in 2012, said that China is a big power and all the other states are small powers, and that's just a fact. That was an incredibly arrogant statement that basically belied a colonialist mindset on the part of the Chinese government. So the Chinese government, I think, tries to claim the entirety of the South China Sea. At the recent Shangri-La dialogue, the Chinese defense minister basically demanded that the United States and its allies essentially give the South China Sea to China. And this is unacceptable because the South China Sea is international waters. So I think there is a serious issue here that we do have to stand firm and push back against Beijing. And part of this is working together under a policy of integrated deterrence, whereby we make it clear that the region is united against Beijing's attempt to provoke and also to intimidate.
Interestingly, too, there was this incident over the weekend where this sort of flotilla of Russian and Chinese vessels pushed as close to US waters as they have before around Alaska. Now, what are they trying to prove there?
Once again, it's sending signals to the United States. Here you have an example of China and Russia working together. Moscow and Beijing, just before Russia invaded Ukraine, signed an unlimited partnership. The possibility that China did not know about Russia's intentions to invade Ukraine beggars belief. And so now you have China and Russia working together militarily to practice operations together. It does suggest that in a future war, perhaps over a Chinese attempt to impose unification on Taiwan against the wishes of the Taiwanese people, that China and Russia would be working together against the United States. So the US would be confronting both China and Russia in the Indo-Pacific region.
Yeah, which is very disturbing, as you say. And it's, again, the sort of forked tongue that China operates with, even, at the moment trying to broker peace talks with Ukraine, but at the same time constantly backing Russia.
Exactly. And there's a lot of indications now that China is covertly supplying Russia with dual-use technologies that then can be applied for military purposes. So I don't see China as a independent, non-aligned arbiter of peace. I see China as very much in Russia's camp, trying to get a peace deal in Ukraine that benefits Russia at the expense of Ukraine. And so I think, once again, the US, the international community need to stand firm against both China and Russia to ensure that in Ukraine, Ukraine wins decisively, that Russia withdraws from the entirety of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea, and then Ukraine is brought swiftly into NATO. That's the only way we are going to have peace in Europe.
Yeah, as you say, very shifting global movements. Good to talk, Malcolm. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.